Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world that feels both alien and uncomfortably close, your life as a eunuch. Imagine being small, maybe 7 or 8, when the story really begins. The air smells of dust and sweat, the clamor of a marketplace fading as unfamiliar hands grip your shoulders. You don't know it yet, but your entire future has just been purchased. You probably won't survive this, if we're honest, but that's part of the strangely sleepy drama we're diving into tonight, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jostled down a dirt road, somewhere between being a child and being seen as an object. The men who escort you barely speak, their sandals slap against the stone, dust rising in lazy swirls. You hear birds above, but they don't sound comforting. They sound like they're laughing at you. Most eunuchs in history were taken young. In the Byzantine Empire, for example, boys were often chosen before puberty. The younger you were, the easier it was for the palace surgeons to mold you into what they wanted, a loyal servant who wouldn't father children, who wouldn't create dynasties, who was considered safe around royal women. There's a strange irony here. You're chosen precisely because you're powerless. The palace wants someone who can be close to the royal family without ever becoming a threat to the bloodline. Historians still argue whether this was really about loyalty or simply control. Either way, your future narrows with every step toward the city. You pass through gates taller than any tree you've seen. Guards in bronze helmets look down at you, indifferent. The smell shifts, less sweat, more incense. You're in the outer precinct now, where traders bring everything from Persian silk to dried figs. A eunuch official takes charge of you. He examines your face, your teeth, even the curve of your spine. It's like being a horse at auction, except the stakes are far stranger. There's a kind of recruitment system at work. In Ming China, some boys were taken as prisoners of war, others were sold by desperate families hoping their son might find favor in the Forbidden City. It wasn't always pure cruelty, sometimes it was framed as opportunity. But as you shuffle deeper into the palace compound, with walls closing you in, it doesn't feel much like opportunity. It feels like vanishing. You're placed in a courtyard with other boys. Some are crying quietly, others stare blankly as though their minds have already fled. You try to talk, but your words come out dry and brittle. The older eunuchs, standing nearby, hush you. They know what comes next. A mainstream fact. Eunuchs were used across many cultures: China, Byzantium, the Ottoman Empire, even ancient Mesopotamia. They were trusted because they couldn't form rival dynasties. A quirky tidbit: some were deliberately fattened before surgery, as if extra body mass might help them survive the ordeal. Scholars debate whether that actually worked or was just a comforting superstition. Night falls. The palace lanterns glow with oil flames, casting shadows that make the walls look impossibly tall. You curl up on a straw mat, trying to breathe through the incense that clogs your throat. Tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever the officials decide, you'll face the blade that seals your fate. But tonight, you're still in between, neither boy nor eunuch, still dreaming of a family you'll never see again. Your last memory of freedom is not heroic, not cinematic. It's a faint whistle of the wind against tiled roofs, a star winking out above the palace walls. You close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because keeping them open feels too heavy. Sleep takes you, though it isn't kind. Morning doesn't arrive gently. You're shaken awake before dawn, the stars still lingering like flecks of salt across the sky. A senior eunuch, his eyes tired, his robe pressed, tells you to follow. Your stomach sinks in that hollow way it does before a storm. You're not told what's happening, but you already know. The air smells sharper today, tinged with something metallic. You're taken into a low chamber lit by oil lamps. Shadows ripple across the walls, making the whole room feel like it's breathing. There are no grand decorations here, just mats on the floor, basins of water, and tools laid out on cloth. The surgeon isn't dressed like a healer, he looks more like a butcher, calm and businesslike. The eunuch's path is sealed with a blade. In different cultures, the procedure varied, sometimes only the testicles were removed, sometimes everything. In Ming China, they took the root and the stem, as the records put it, leaving only a smooth scar and a reed inserted into the urethra to keep it open during healing. Brutal? Absolutely. And yet it was a system refined over centuries, as though cruelty could somehow be made efficient. You're stripped of your clothes. The cold bites at your skin, and suddenly you're more aware of your own body than you've ever been. You're pushed down on the mat, arms pinned, and the surgeon kneels with his tools. He doesn't look at your face. To him, you're one more boy in a long line. There's no gentle anesthesia here. Sometimes opium was given, or wine if you were lucky, but often you had nothing. You feel pressure, then searing pain that tears through your whole body. It's not just physical, it's the sound, the smell of iron, the way the world narrows to a tunnel of heat and darkness. You scream, but your voice sounds far away, like someone else's. Historians still argue whether surgeons of the time genuinely believed they were helping boys ascend into a higher calling, or whether it was just the cold economics of supplying the palace with reliable servants. Some eunuch memoirs describe the operation with bitterness, others with a strange pride, as if surviving it made them chosen. Here's a quirky fact: in the Ottoman Empire, the preferred surgeons were actually from Egypt, because they had a reputation for skill in the procedure. The irony? The mortality rate was still enormous. Some sources suggest up to 75% of boys died during or shortly after. Imagine rolling those dice with your life. When it's over, you don't feel like yourself. You don't feel like anyone. You're lifted, barely conscious, and carried to a side chamber where a reed tube is inserted to help you urinate while healing. Your body rebels, sweat pours, fever sparks, and your stomach heaves though you've eaten nothing. The world tilts in and out of focus. The older eunuchs glance at you, some with pity, others with indifference. They've seen this scene too many times. A boy screaming, then silent. A boy living, or not. To them, you're not unique, you're simply the latest recruit passing through the furnace. You fade in and out of sleep, the pain gnawing at you like an animal that refuses to let go. The reed scratches every time you move. You wonder if death would be kinder. And yet, somehow, you keep breathing. The surgeon checks on you once, pressing the wound with rough hands. He mutters something about the bleeding slowing, then moves on. That's the closest you'll get to bedside manner. In the palace, survival is your responsibility now. Night comes again. You lie on your mat, body burning, heart racing. Every sound, footsteps, coughs, the shuffle of straw, feels amplified. You're not sure if you're still the same person who arrived yesterday. Maybe that boy is gone, and what's left is someone else, someone the palace can use. Sleep comes, but it's fractured. Images of blades, fire, and faceless men haunt you. You're adrift, half in the world, half somewhere beyond it. When dawn breaks again, you're still alive. Barely. And in this world, that counts as a kind of victory. Days blur together after the blade. At first, every breath feels like it might be your last. The pain is constant, sharp when you move, dull and throbbing when you lie still. Fever comes in waves, soaking your straw mat, leaving you shivering under thin sheets. The smell of old blood clings to you, no matter how many times attendants dab the wound with cloth steeped in wine or vinegar. Some boys never wake again after the second night. You hear their coughing turn into silence, their mats quietly removed by men who don't say a word. You try not to notice, but in the haze of your sickness, you count the gaps where bodies used to be. The thought presses in, maybe you're next, in Ming China. Eunuchs were given weeks to recover before being sent to duty. Records suggest that some were cared for in secret chambers, away from the palace's main bustle. The official story was that eunuchs were treated well to ensure survival, but the unofficial truth was far grimmer. Many were left in the shadows, tended only by older eunuchs who remembered their own ordeals. Historians still argue whether this neglect was deliberate, weed out the weak, or simply a matter of limited resources. You lie still most of the day, listening. The palace hums faintly in the distance, the calls of guards changing shifts, the clatter of servants carrying water, the muted sound of court music drifting through walls. It's all happening just beyond your reach, like a life behind a veil. One quirky detail, the reed tube placed in your urethra is supposed to help you heal. But if it slips out too soon, scar tissue can seal the opening shut. The solution? Some attendants would blow gently into the tube to check airflow, as if you were no more than a faulty flute. You're half delirious when an older eunuch does this for you, but you remember the sound, the strange wheeze of your body being tested like an instrument. Slowly, the fever eases. You begin to sit up, though the motion makes your wound throb. Food returns, thin rice porridge, broth with a few floating herbs. It tastes like heaven compared to the days when your stomach rejected everything. One afternoon, you even managed to shuffle across the chamber to the basin of water. Washing your face for the first time since the operation. The shock of coolness is almost enough to make you cry. The older eunuchs start to talk to you more. At first, it's practical, how to clean yourself, how to move without tearing the scar. Then, once you're steadier, the conversations widen. They tell you palace stories, half rumor, half warning, about eunuchs who rose to incredible power, and those who vanished overnight for knowing the wrong secret. Their voices are calm, almost sing-song, like men repeating lessons they once heard as boys. You're told not to long for the outside world. That boy who had a family, who chased birds in a field, no longer exists. You are someone new now. The palace will feed you, clothe you, and work you to the bone. If you're clever, you may rise. If you're foolish, you may die. But whatever you do, forget the person you once were. As your body adjusts, your emotions grow complicated. Some mornings you feel almost proud of surviving, like you've passed through a gate of fire. Other mornings you feel hollow, robbed of something you can't name. You watch your reflection in a bowl of water and wonder, do you still count as a man? Historians still debate how eunuchs saw themselves. Some sources describe them as bitter, resentful, cut off from both masculinity and womanhood. Others show them embracing their unique status, claiming to stand closer to heaven because they were neither fully one thing nor the other. The truth is likely a mix, shifting from day to day, as you already feel within yourself. Weeks pass. The wound scars over. The reed is removed at last, leaving you with a faint burning sensation but also a strange relief. You test your body, walking a little further each day, bending, even carrying a small bucket of water. Life feels possible again. One evening, you're summoned. The senior eunuch tells you that your recovery is deemed sufficient. Tomorrow, you will enter the palace proper. Your stomach twists, but not from pain. It's anticipation now, fear mixed with the faintest spark of curiosity. Whatever happens next, your old life is behind you. The doors ahead are massive, carved with dragons and clouds, and tomorrow, they will open. The morning you're led into the palace proper, the world feels impossibly large. The doors swing open, carved dragons glaring down at you as though testing your courage. You shuffle forward, still a little weak, still uncertain if your legs will hold. The scent of sandalwood drifts from braziers, mingling with the faint tang of polished bronze. Everything gleams, everything whispers of power. The first thing you notice is the hierarchy. Eunuchs are everywhere, but not all look alike. Some wear plain, rough-spun robes, their heads bowed as they hurry about with buckets and brooms. Others glide in silk, their posture upright, their hands tucked in long sleeves like scholars. The difference is subtle but unmistakable: rank. You're a newcomer, and that means you're at the very bottom of the ladder. In Ming China, eunuchs were organized into a labyrinth of departments, ranging from laundry to the imperial stables to the all-powerful directorate of ceremonial. In Byzantium, eunuchs might serve as chamberlains, guarding the emperor's bedroom, or as generals leading armies. Across cultures, the pattern was similar: a eunuch could be invisible or indispensable, depending on where fortune placed him. Historians still argue whether this flexibility made eunuchs dangerous wild cards or merely convenient tools. You're assigned to a dormitory with other fresh initiates. The bedding is thin, the food plain, but compared to the weeks of recovery, it feels almost luxurious. The older eunuchs in charge tell you when to rise, when to bow, when to speak, and mostly, when not to. Watch more than you talk, one advises with a crooked smile. The walls here have ears sharper than knives. You start with menial work. Carrying water from cisterns, scrubbing stone floors until your knees ache, hauling wood for braziers that never seem to burn low. At first, it feels humiliating: you were taken for this? But you quickly realize every chore is a test. The supervisors watch how you endure, how you obey, whether you complain. Your life depends on proving you're useful without being noticed for the wrong reasons. The palace itself is a maze. Corridors twist and branch, courtyards open suddenly onto gardens where carved rocks and ponds shimmer under lantern light. You're often lost, but older eunuchs tug you back by the sleeve before you wander somewhere forbidden. There are doors you're never to approach. Chambers where silence is absolute. You learn quickly that curiosity is not survival. One quirky tidbit: in the Forbidden City, eunuchs were sometimes required to carry little identification tablets around their necks, engraved with their names and assigned duties. Lose yours, and you risked punishment, because in a sea of shaved heads and similar robes, how else would officials keep track? Imagine misplacing your palace ID and suddenly finding yourself accused of spying. You begin to observe the rhythm of palace life. At dawn, drums beat and gongs echo, summoning officials to their duties. The emperor's meals are paraded with ceremonial flourish, dishes carried by eunuchs who walk as though they balance the world on their palms. Musicians rehearse for hours, their notes slipping through corridors like invisible threads. And everywhere, eunuchs scurry, part of the machinery that keeps the palace alive. One evening, you're ordered to stand guard outside a side hall. You're not guarding against invaders, no, the thick palace walls are already impenetrable. Instead, your job is to keep people out who shouldn't enter, and perhaps more importantly, to remember nothing about who goes in. A noblewoman passes, her perfume heavy and sweet, her embroidered slippers whispering across the floor. You bow deeply, heart pounding, knowing your eyes must stay fixed on the tiles. Later, when she leaves, her face is pale, her steps quicken. You're burning with questions, but you'll never ask them. Survival depends on silence. Historians still debate just how much power eunuchs truly wielded in daily palace life. Some say they were indispensable administrators who could make or break careers. Others argue they were scapegoats, blamed whenever things went wrong. From your perspective, it's both true. You're at once invisible and dangerously visible, a servant who might also be a witness. At night, back in the dormitory, you collapse on your mat. The day's smells cling to you: incense, dust, sweat, the faint trace of lacquer from polished furniture. You stare at the ceiling beams and think, this is your world now. No fields, no markets, no family. Only corridors, courtyards, and secrets behind carved doors. You close your eyes, trying to imagine the stars beyond the palace walls, the sky you can no longer see. The air here is heavy, but sleep comes anyway. Tomorrow, the drums will sound again, and you'll rise, one more shadow moving through the emperor's endless halls. You soon learn the strangest truth of palace life: even though you live shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of eunuchs, it feels lonelier than ever. Family is gone, children are impossible, and friendship here is a delicate balancing act. Men without families must invent new ways to belong, or risk dissolving into silence. Your dormitory hums with whispers after dark. The younger eunuchs trade scraps of gossip like coin: who's been promoted, who's been punished, whose name was spoken in the wrong hall. Older eunuchs sometimes join in, but their tone is sharper, seasoned with the bitterness of men who've already seen too many come and go. Historians still argue whether eunuchs genuinely formed families inside the palace or whether those bonds were always strategic. Evidence suggests both. Some younger eunuchs adopted older ones as fathers, creating a kind of substitute kinship, complete with inheritance of small belongings. Others built fierce rivalries, guarding scraps of influence like cats over fish bones. Your first family moment comes when an older eunuch offers you half his steamed bun. His name is Bao, his face round, his eyes tired but kind. "Eat," he says simply. It's a small gesture, but in a place where every mouthful is rationed, it feels like being welcomed into something fragile yet vital. Eunuchs without families outside the palace often pooled their earnings. They formed brotherhoods, writing contracts that bound them to support one another in old age. Some even arranged for joint burials, creating tomb inscriptions that called each other brothers in life and death. A quirky tidbit: in Ming-era Beijing, there are tombs that list not wives or children but fellow eunuchs as kin. In a society obsessed with lineage, these were radical acts of chosen family. Of course, not every bond is kind. You quickly discover that betrayal is as common as brotherhood. One evening, you overhear two eunuchs whispering by a brazier. By dawn, one of them has been reassigned to latrine duty, widely understood as punishment. The other walks around smugly, clearly the informant. You file the lesson away: affection is dangerous unless it's careful, unless it's earned. During meals, you sit on low stools, eating from bowls that all look the same. Rice, cabbage, sometimes fish if the kitchen is generous. Conversations weave between jokes and warnings. "Never trust a eunuch with silken sleeves," one boy mutters. Everyone laughs nervously, knowing exactly what he means. The higher ranks, dressed in finery, who pull invisible strings. The lack of family shapes your thoughts in odd ways. You notice the children of nobles running through gardens, their laughter drifting like music. You watch mothers cradle infants during visits to the palace. You feel a twist in your chest, half longing, half resignation. That world is gone for you, closed forever. Instead, your family is Bao, and the other boys who share your straw mats, your punishments, your fleeting joys. Historians still debate whether eunuchs felt freer without traditional family obligations. Some memoirs describe the palace as a place where men reinvented themselves, freed from the pressures of fatherhood and lineage. Others suggest it was a wound that never healed. You feel both sides at once, sometimes relieved you'll never have to till your father's land, sometimes aching when you see a child smile. At night, lying in rows on the mats, someone always tells stories. Tales of emperors who trusted their eunuchs so deeply that fortunes rose overnight. Tales of fools who overreached and lost their tongues, or worse. Sometimes the stories are funny, delivered with sly humor that makes even the sternest attendant smirk. Other times, they're sharp warnings, meant to lodge in your memory. You realize these stories serve the same role as family lore. They teach you who you are now, who you might become, and what fates to avoid. You're no longer a son or brother. You're an initiate in a shadow family, built of fear and necessity, bound by secrets instead of blood. One night, Bao pats your shoulder as you drift toward sleep. "We don't have families," he says softly, "but we keep each other alive. That's enough." His words echo long after his snores begin, carrying you into uneasy dreams. The first time you're assigned to serve directly in a noble's chamber, your heart hammers so loudly you're sure someone will hear it. You clutch the lacquered tray with both hands, trying to walk with the practiced stillness you've seen in older eunuchs. The silk robe rustles against your ankles, a sound that suddenly feels far too loud in the echoing hall. Service in the palace isn't glamorous, it's 1,000 small tasks, performed with perfect precision, and the unspoken knowledge that any mistake could end you. You learn to bow at the right angle, to announce arrivals in a voice neither too soft nor too bold, to anticipate the emperor's needs before he speaks them. Historians still argue whether eunuchs were truly trusted companions or simply necessary tools. Some chronicles describe emperors weeping openly at the death of a favorite eunuch, others paint them as disposable, discarded the moment they faltered. For you, the truth is painfully clear: you are trusted only as long as you are useful. Each day begins before dawn. You rise at the sound of drums, wash in cold water that jolts you awake, and report to your station. You may spend hours polishing bronze mirrors until they reflect like water, or arranging silks in hues so precise that one shade out of place could draw rebuke. You deliver messages, fetch tea, guard doors, carry incense burners, always silent, always invisible, yet invisibility is deceptive. The emperor sees you, the empress notices you. And the princes and princesses depend on you. You're everywhere and nowhere at once, like a shadow that keeps the palace running. And unlike the guards or ministers, you're in the inner quarters, where few men are allowed. That's where your strange power lies. A quirky tidbit: in the Forbidden City, some eunuchs were specifically tasked with bed warming, lying on the emperor's mattress before he retired, to make sure it wasn't cold or, more ominously, poisoned. Imagine being a human hot water bottle, except one who might detect assassination attempts by accident. You also learn the art of flattery. A misplaced word can mean disaster, but the right compliment at the right time might secure your survival, or even advancement. You praise the emperor's calligraphy, even if it looks like drunken chicken scratch. You admire the empress's hairpins, though they weigh so much her neck tilts under them. Gentle sarcasm sneaks into your thoughts. But never into your speech. Serving power is exhausting in a way physical labor never was. Your body aches from bowing, your face hurts from holding polite expressions. But you also sense the strange intimacy of the role. You're closer to the emperor when he yawns over breakfast than most officials will ever be in their lives. You see the cracks, the fatigue, the irritation, the very human moments that the world beyond the palace walls never glimpses. Historians still debate whether eunuchs manipulated rulers with this access or whether rulers always kept them firmly in check. Memoirs of fallen officials often blame eunuchs for everything: corruption, decadence, betrayal, because blaming a voiceless servant is safer than accusing the emperor himself. The truth, as always, is murkier. You fall into rhythm. Days blur with routine: open the shutters, light the incense, fetch the brush, refill the teacup, close the shutters, repeat. Yet in this repetition, you begin to understand why eunuchs could last decades in service. The palace devours individuality. If you surrender to its pattern, you survive. And sometimes, survival brings strange rewards. One morning, after you perfectly anticipate a noble's request, handing him tea before he even asks, he nods slightly. Just a nod. But in the palace, that single gesture feels like the sun breaking through clouds. Bao claps you on the back later, whispering, "You'll live longer than most." That night, lying on your mat, you feel torn. You've been mutilated, stolen from your family, trapped in a world of rituals and masks. And yet, part of you thrills at the idea of being noticed, even valued, by the most powerful people in the land. Service, it seems, is both a chain and a key. Which one it becomes depends on how well you play the game. You start to notice that the palace isn't just marble floors, golden thrones, and neat schedules. It breathes with secrets, the kind that slither behind curtains and whisper down corridors. You carry a tray of fruit into a chamber, bow, and back out silently, yet your ears catch the edge of an argument between two ministers. Later, when you pass a courtyard, you see a noble slip coins into another eunuch's sleeve. You're meant to see nothing, to remember nothing, But how can you not? The paradox of your life is this: you know more than almost anyone in the empire, but you can never speak of it. Historians still argue whether eunuchs actively exploited this access to information or whether most simply carried the weight of knowledge like a stone in the stomach. Either way, you feel that stone pressing heavier each day. Late at night, when the halls are quiet, you're sent on errands through the inner court. Sometimes it's fetching a scroll, sometimes delivering a sealed box whose contents you're not allowed to question. You bow to the guards, slip past the draped doors, and enter chambers where laughter or sobbing spills out before being hushed. The curtains are heavy, but never thick enough to stop sound. One quirky tidbit: in Byzantium, eunuchs were often sent as go-betweens in delicate scandals, precisely because their words carried both trust and plausible deniability. One record even describes a eunuch tasked with delivering secret love letters between courtiers. An unpaid postman of forbidden romance. You hear plenty of scandal yourself. The emperor arguing with his brother over taxes. A princess weeping because her marriage is delayed. Even the empress hissing fury at her attendants. These moments make the royals seem less like gods and more like humans wrapped in silk and pride. You feel almost guilty knowing so much, as though their vulnerability is a treasure you were never meant to hold. And yet, danger hums in that knowledge. You hear whispers of eunuchs vanishing after overhearing the wrong secret. A careless comment, a slip of the tongue, even a raised eyebrow in the wrong moment could be enough. Bao warns you one evening as you sweep the floor: the palace doesn't fear what we do. It fears what we know. The realization chills you. You recall the noblewoman you once guarded outside the chamber, her pale face as she exited. At the time, you said nothing. Now you understand why silence was the only safe choice. The knowledge becomes intoxicating, though. You start to map in your mind who favors whom, who despises whom, which officials avoid certain corridors at certain times. It's a puzzle, and every overheard phrase adds another piece. You find yourself smirking when ministers give speeches in court, because you know what they muttered in private the night before. Historians still debate whether this accumulation of secrets made eunuchs more manipulative or merely more burdened. Some argue they became political kingmakers, others see them as tragic figures carrying truths they could never share. In your bones, you sense both possibilities. One night, you're summoned to deliver a sealed document. You carry it carefully, eyes lowered, through echoing corridors until you reach the inner sanctum. The chamber is lit by a single lamp, shadows pooling in the corners. A prince takes the scroll from you, his fingers trembling. He doesn't thank you, he doesn't even look at you. But later that week, the minister he opposed is abruptly exiled. You wonder if you had just carried the spark that lit the fire. Returning to your dormitory, you lie awake. The walls seem closer, the air thicker. You realize your life is a balancing act on a knife's edge. Too much knowledge, and you're dangerous. Too little awareness, and you're vulnerable. The trick, Bao once said, is to know everything and reveal nothing, so you close your eyes, clutching the blanket against your chest, and repeat silently to yourself: you heard nothing, you saw nothing, you know nothing. And somehow, that lie helps you sleep. The longer you serve, the more you realize that you are not simply a servant. You are, in a strange and silent way, a reflection of power itself. The emperor cannot be everywhere at once, but his eunuchs can. You are his hands, his ears, his shadow in the corners of the court. And sometimes, when the emperor is weak or distracted, that shadow becomes stronger than the throne. You have seen it already. The emperor grows ill, and suddenly his ministers squabble like roosters. Who is left to steady the household? Not his children, still young. Not his wives, who are divided by jealousies. No, it is his eunuchs, his loyal servants who have no families of their own to distract them, who remain by his bedside. Who carry his edicts, who whisper his commands through the palace. In the annals of history, eunuchs rise again and again to astonishing heights. In China, Some became grand admirals, commanding fleets that touched Africa's shores. In Byzantium, eunuchs were generals, scholars, even patriarchs of the church. They could not father sons, but they could mold emperors. That irony never leaves your mind, denied the smallest household, yet shaping the greatest empires. You recall one night when Bao leaned close and whispered, "Do not think we are powerless. The emperor trusts us because we cannot build dynasties of our own. But that is why we are dangerous. We belong to no one but him. And ourselves." His smile was sly, almost proud. Your duties change as you gain seniority. No longer just carrying trays or sweeping floors, you begin to handle documents, escort envoys, and oversee younger recruits. With each promotion, you glimpse how authority works. You see that a nod from you can decide whether a petition reaches the emperor's desk, or is lost forever. You notice officials bowing a little lower when they hand you scrolls, their voices sweeter when they greet you. Respect, or fear? Perhaps both. At times, the power frightens you. You remember the first time you denied a merchant audience with a princess because his tribute seemed too meager. He fell to his knees, clutching at your robe, weeping that his fortune depended on her favor. You shook him off and walked away, heart pounding. That night, you lay awake, realizing you had played God with his life. There are whispers among your peers, too. Some eunuchs boast of the bribes they've collected, jewels hidden under floorboards, gold sewn into cushions. Others talk about manipulating appointments, placing their allies into key posts, while rivals are nudged into exile. You see greed flicker in their eyes, and it unsettles you. Yet part of you wonders if you, too, will fall into the same temptation. History records both sides. Some eunuchs were tireless guardians of their rulers, loyal to the end. Others became infamous for corruption, bleeding empires dry. You feel yourself standing at the crossroads of these two paths, uncertain which way your footsteps will turn, but there is one moment that solidifies your sense of power. The emperor himself, frail and coughing, leans on you as you guide him through a hall. His hand, heavy on your arm, trembles with age. Around you, courtiers bow low, their eyes wide. For a moment, you understand, you are not simply leading an old man, you are carrying the empire itself. That thought lingers long after you return to your chamber. Power, you realize, is not always about titles or crowns. Sometimes it lies in who the emperor trusts enough to stand at his side when he falters. Sometimes it lies in those who guard the silence of the throne, and you, though you never chose this life, are now one of those men. By now, you've learned that service is not only about moving silently through marble halls or carrying secrets in your chest. It's also about mastering the art of the written word. Scrolls, registers, letters, reports, parchment becomes as much a battlefield as swords and armies. You find yourself with ink-stained fingers more often than calloused hands, and you start to realize, power flows not only through whispers but through records. You are taught to write with meticulous precision, every character shaped as if it could change the fate of a kingdom. In the stillness of the scriptorium, you sit among rows of eunuchs hunched over their desks, the faint scratch of brushes the only sound. The air smells of ink, glue, and old paper. Sometimes your back aches, sometimes your eyes burn, but you continue, because you know one misplaced stroke could ruin an edict, or doom a minister. This is where eunuchs become indispensable. The emperor may dictate, but it is you who records. You hold the pen, and thus you hold interpretation. If you pause too long, if your wrist tilts slightly, meaning can shift. Historians still argue whether some great decrees were ever truly spoken by emperors, or whether eunuchs, trusted to transcribe, altered them to their own advantage. You think about this late at night, when you reread what you've written, wondering whether your hand serves only as a vessel, or whether it secretly wields its own authority. A small joke drifts into your mind. If you accidentally spilled tea on a scroll, could that erase a law? No, you chuckle to yourself, but the thought makes the long hours bearable. Literacy is a gift not everyone enjoys. Many soldiers cannot read, and even some minor nobles stumble through lines like clumsy children. But you, taken as a boy, cut off from family, find knowledge becomes your inheritance. Some eunuchs even become scholars, compiling histories or penning philosophical treatises. A few compose poetry so refined it still echoes centuries later. You wonder if anyone will ever read your neat little brushstrokes when you are gone, or if they will crumble into dust like the rest of your life, and of course, not all writing is so lofty. Sometimes you are copying tedious supply inventories, 143 bolts of silk, 67 jars of sesame oil, 25 goats. Other times, you file reports of palace gossip disguised as incident logs, a concubine feigning illness, a guard caught asleep, a cook suspected of stealing spices. You sigh, but you also know, these small details can one day topple fortunes. Bao once leaned over your shoulder as you worked and whispered, a blade may kill one man. A pen can kill thousands. You laughed, but the words sank deep. They remind you each day why your strokes must be careful, deliberate, and exact. There are also moments of quiet pride. You remember preparing a diplomatic letter for a foreign envoy, sealing it with crimson wax. Days later, when the envoy bowed to the emperor, he quoted your phrasing back in his native tongue, clearly impressed by its elegance. The emperor smiled faintly, and you, though invisible in the corner, felt taller than you had in years. Yet there is also danger. One error in a document, one poorly chosen word, and blame falls squarely on you. A colleague of yours once mistranslated a tribute list, omitting the emperor's title. The envoy was insulted, the court in uproar, and the poor eunuch was demoted to cleaning stables for months. You never forgot the look on his face when his ink-stained hands were replaced with manure-stained ones. Through it all, you come to understand that being a eunuch is not only about silence and obedience, it is about memory. You record the empire's heartbeat, one line at a time. And though history may never remember your name, it will breathe through the characters you've left behind, hidden in scrolls that may one day resurface, and as you dip your brush again, you think, perhaps this is the only kind of immortality someone like you is ever allowed. Even in a palace ruled by strict hierarchy and rigid ritual, human desire finds ways to sneak through the cracks. You notice it everywhere, glances held too long, whispers exchanged behind fans, hands brushing accidentally, or perhaps intentionally. The eunuch's body is meant to prevent reproduction, but it does not prevent curiosity, companionship, or intimacy of a certain sort. You learn quickly that boundaries are both rigid and invisible. You carry messages between princesses and ministers, witnessing secret rendezvous that leave courtiers flushed and pale by turns. You see the way a noblewoman's eyes linger on a young page, or the way an envoy gestures toward a concubine, careful that no one else notices. Your presence is tolerated, ignored, or sometimes sought after. You are a silent confidant, a living shadow who might glimpse what no one else is supposed to. Historians still argue whether eunuchs themselves engaged in intimate relationships within the palace or whether such stories are exaggerated gossip. Some sources describe bonds between eunuchs, whispered alliances of flesh and warmth. Others insist the constraints of their bodies made such relationships rare, limited to emotional companionship rather than physical intimacy. In truth, both likely existed, depending on the individual and the opportunity. One quirky tidbit: in the Ottoman palace, eunuchs sometimes acted as intermediaries for clandestine romances. Slipping notes, gifts, or even small trinkets between forbidden lovers. You chuckle to yourself when recalling the scene in which a young eunuch delivers a ring, only to be caught and scolded for interfering with matters of the heart. You recognize the irony: your body prevents you from family, yet you carry their love like a courier of fate. Your own feelings are complicated. You notice admiration in the eyes of a fellow eunuch, subtle, fleeting. There is a quiet understanding between you that no one else can touch. But you are careful. Too much closeness, too much visibility, could mean punishment or exile. So you keep your hands folded, your head bowed, and your voice soft. The palace has taught you patience, vigilance, and discretion. Even observation is a form of intimacy. You watch the empress practice her needlework, her fingers deftly looping thread in intricate patterns, her lips moving silently as she recites poetry to herself. You watch a young prince arguing over maps, oblivious to the way his tutor's hand lingers on his shoulder, guiding yet restraining. These moments teach you more about desire and restraint than any text could, yet temptation is not only visual. The palace smells of sandalwood, jasmine, and heated stone. The heat from braziers mingles with the faint scent of human sweat. Even walking past a corridor at night, the air carries whispers of hidden passions, faint laughter, and muffled sobs. The boundaries of propriety stretch and snap, and you learn to navigate the tension without becoming ensnared yourself. Sometimes, these observations become leverage. You hear of lovers quarreling, a secret favor owed, or a small insult whispered behind a curtain. Knowledge of these things can be used, or ignored. You remember Bao's warning, we don't act. We only remember. And that is power enough. By the time you lie on your mat at night, your thoughts are tangled between the intricacies of human desire and the rigid structure of duty. You are at once observer and participant, living in a world where intimacy exists but must never be claimed. The palace pulses with forbidden longing, and you, as always, are both witness and custodian. Years pass, and your body grows accustomed to the endless cycles of service. You no longer notice the constant bowing or the harsh sunlight streaming through the courtyard. You move with a grace that once took conscious effort, now instinctive. Your hands are steady, your voice controlled, your eyes alert to every subtle movement. You've become part of the palace itself, a shadow among shadows. Your seniority brings new responsibilities. You train the younger eunuchs, showing them how to carry trays without rattling, how to bow so their heads do not scrape ceilings, how to hold their composure when the emperor's gaze fixes on them unexpectedly. Sometimes you catch a boy trembling as he delivers an important document. And you suppress the urge to laugh or console him. Both reactions could be dangerous. Instead, you teach with the calm that has taken years to cultivate. Historians still debate whether eunuchs who rose to senior positions wielded real power or simply performed an elaborate charade of authority. Some were indeed kingmakers, quietly maneuvering ministers and influencing imperial decisions. Others were little more than figureheads, respected only because of their rank and proximity to the throne. You see both in action every day, the smiling eunuch who bends ministers to his will, the terrified clerk who obeys every order without question. A quirky tidbit: some eunuchs in the main court were skilled in martial arts. Not because they needed to fight, but because their movements, fast, precise, and silent, helped them navigate dangerous corridors or escort prized items. You've practiced a few basic forms yourself, mostly as a ritual for discipline, but occasionally as an instinctive reflex when a scuffle breaks out in the servants' quarters. The palace is never static. New officials arrive, old ones are dismissed, foreign envoys come and go. You observe everything, noting alliances and rivalries, opportunities and threats. With every passing year, your memory becomes a living archive, a repository of knowledge about people who think themselves untouchable. The power of observation has grown to match your duties, and you realize, invisibility can be the most potent form of influence. One evening, a minor scandal erupts. A prince's gift is misplaced, accusations fly, and tempers flare. You watch from a corridor, pretending to sweep the floor, noting every expression, every faltering word. By the time the emperor intervenes, you understand who is responsible and who will be punished. You share nothing. You simply survive. That is the rule of the palace. Sleep comes later now, lighter and more fragmented. Even when your body rests, your mind catalogues every face, every whispered remark, every subtle shift in behavior. You dream sometimes of a life outside, though the dream is quickly dismissed as impossible. Instead, the palace itself becomes your world, its walls, corridors, and lantern-lit nights familiar companions, historians still argue about the psychological toll of lifelong eunuch service. Some suggest that isolation and constant surveillance produced cautious, calculating individuals. Others contend that eunuchs developed extraordinary resilience, capable of managing crises and navigating complex hierarchies. Your life reflects both. You are vigilant, wary, but also extraordinarily adaptable. By the time the first light touches the high rooftops, you are already moving through the halls, performing tasks with practiced efficiency. You glance briefly at Bao, older now, his hands slightly shakier, and a silent acknowledgement passes between you. Both of you have survived the impossible, yet neither of you is untouched. You carry scars, knowledge, and power that the world outside could never comprehend. With seniority comes subtle authority. You are no longer just a shadow. Others, new recruits, even some low-ranking officials, look to you for guidance. The palace has taught you patience, discretion, and perception, but now it also teaches you influence. You realize that a single well-timed suggestion, a quiet nudge, or even a look in the right place can redirect a meeting, sway a minister, or prevent disaster. You oversee younger eunuchs now, instructing them in duties both practical and ceremonial. Remember, you tell them, obedience is survival. Observation is power. Some of the boys nod earnestly, eager to absorb your knowledge. Others smirk, thinking they know more than they do. You let them stumble. A lesson learned the hard way is remembered forever, and you know the palace rewards memory above all. Historians still argue whether eunuchs wielded real political power or simply acted as mediators in an empire designed to exclude them from inheritance and military command. In your experience, power is rarely declared, it is whispered, inferred, and exercised subtly. A eunuch can redirect a tribute, delay a document, or misplace a report, and no one will question the act. The palace is a game, and you've learned to play it without being noticed. One quirky tidbit: some eunuchs kept elaborate personal libraries in their quarters, filled with texts on philosophy, medicine, military strategy, and poetry. They had no heirs, yet their intellectual legacy could influence scholars and rulers for decades. You have begun collecting scraps of scrolls and manuscripts yourself, secretly preserving knowledge that might otherwise vanish. The social networks in the palace are delicate. Alliances are built on observation, subtle favors, and silence. One misstep, a whispered complaint, a moment of favoritism, can undo years of careful navigation. You learn to interpret glances, shifts in posture, and the faintest changes in tone. Often, the smallest gesture communicates more than words ever could. Your interactions with the emperor have become more complex. He trusts you with information about diplomacy, military plans, and internal court disputes. Sometimes he seeks your advice, speaking to you in quiet moments when the court is not listening. You respond with cautious precision, offering guidance without overstepping. It is a dance of words, influence, and restraint. At night, the palace is quieter but never silent. You listen to the subtle hum of candle flames, the distant snore of guards, the faint creak of floorboards. Every sound is data, every shadow a potential revelation. You walk the corridors with the instinctive caution of someone who has seen too much, yet knows the right way to move is forward. Historians still debate whether eunuchs' positions of influence came from skill, proximity to power, or simply the unique combination of being trusted yet untouchable. In your own life, it is all three. Your skills, your silence, and your very existence, neither husband nor father, allow you to move in ways that others cannot. You are indispensable, yet disposable. By the end of the day, as you return to your quarters, you understand a truth that has taken years to internalize: the palace is not a place to dominate openly. Its corridors reward patience, observation, and subtlety. Invisibility is power, knowledge is power, and restraint is power. You have all three, and perhaps for the first time, you sense a strange kind of security in them. By now, the palace feels less like a building and more like a living organism. Its corridors pulse with rhythm, its courtyards breathe under sunlight, and its chambers hum with hidden intentions. You glide through it almost without thought, yet your mind catalogues every nuance, the placement of a chair, the angle of a screen, the slight quiver in a guard's voice. These details, seemingly trivial, become the architecture of survival. Your influence is subtle but undeniable. Ministers and envoys begin to seek your guidance without realizing it. A young eunuch approaches you with questions about court etiquette, you correct his bow, suggest minor adjustments in phrasing when delivering messages. And watch as his confidence grows. You realize that in training him, you are shaping not only his day-to-day life but also the ripple of events throughout the palace. Historians still debate whether eunuchs who held senior positions were genuinely political actors or merely intermediaries. In your experience, the line is blurred. You wield influence not through title or army, but through the intimate knowledge of who says what, when, and why. Even a simple gesture, a nod, a pause, a withheld comment, can shift the course of decisions in unseen ways. One quirky tidbit: some eunuchs maintained miniature gardens on their rooftops or in hidden chambers. Tiny bonsai, potted herbs, delicate blooms were cultivated with almost obsessive care. These secret gardens offered peace, a slice of the natural world otherwise denied, and sometimes even a discreet meeting place. You've started your own small arrangement of moss and herbs, feeling a connection to a world that once existed outside the palace walls. You also become more attuned to the emotional currents of the court. You notice the subtle exhaustion in the emperor's gait, the tension in the empress's jaw, the fleeting irritation in a prince's voice. You observe, catalogue, and remember. It is not manipulation, exactly, it is awareness. The palace teaches you that survival is as much about understanding human fragility as it is about obeying commands. Late one night, you are summoned to deliver a scroll to a chamber hidden deep within the complex. The flickering lanterns cast elongated shadows along the walls, and your footsteps echo unnaturally loud in the stillness. You pause, listening for sounds that might reveal another presence, and notice a subtle shift, a curtain trembling, a faint exhale. You cannot see who is there, but instinct tells you the importance of discretion. You bow, leave the scroll, and retreat silently, knowing your absence will be as crucial as your presence. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of decades of service in such an environment. Some suggest eunuchs developed extraordinary resilience, able to interpret subtle cues and manage crises others would miss. Others emphasize isolation and pressure, noting a persistent tension between obedience and autonomy. You feel both. You are patient, precise, and powerful in quiet ways, yet the ever-present scrutiny leaves a lingering vigilance that never fully fades. You sit on your mat, staring at the faint glow of lantern light on the ceiling. Your hands are calloused, your back stiff, your mind constantly alert. And yet, there is a strange satisfaction in mastery. You have survived mutilation, isolation, and the unpredictable tides of palace life. You have transformed silence into skill, observation into power. The palace may be a cage, but within it, you have carved a space of influence, subtle yet real. As sleep descends, you close your eyes with the knowledge that your life, though unusual, constrained, and often perilous, has also become extraordinary. You are a witness, a guardian, a keeper of secrets, and in this labyrinth of power, that is more than enough. As decades pass, the young eunuchs who once seemed so confident are now either gone or transformed into shadows like you. You watch new arrivals arrive wide-eyed, trembling at the weight of the palace and its invisible rules. Sometimes, you find yourself quietly mentoring them, guiding their hands and movements, offering subtle advice without revealing too much. The lessons are simple: obey, observe, survive. But in their simplicity lies power. Your memory has become the palace's living archive. You remember every scroll, every whisper, every bribe delivered in secrecy, every minor scandal quietly swept aside. It is an intangible authority, one that carries both privilege and risk. Knowledge is not only a shield but also a sword. If wielded carefully, it shapes decisions without a single word spoken. Historians still argue whether eunuchs who managed such knowledge genuinely influenced imperial policy or whether they were simply conduits for power held elsewhere. In your experience, it is a blend of both. A quirky tidbit: some eunuchs in later years developed sophisticated networks for sharing information across palaces, cities, and even empires. Messages could be passed with coded gestures, the folding of robes, or the placement of scrolls on certain shelves. In a way, they became the information technology of their era, their bodies and behaviors encoding secrets more efficiently than any messenger could. You notice subtle changes in yourself. The curiosity that once flared now flickers like a controlled flame. The adrenaline from secrets, from the delicate balance of observation and silence, has become a steady hum. Even your emotions are tempered, joy and sorrow arrive quietly, measured, contained. It is not that you feel less, but that you have learned to navigate the palace without letting those feelings dictate your actions. Sometimes, the palace surprises you. An emperor laughs unexpectedly, a minister bows incorrectly but gracefully recovers, a child runs through the gardens with pure delight. You watch, feeling both detached and strangely tender. It is in these moments that you remember what it means to live inside a place that is at once a prison, a school, and a theater. You think often of Bao, who is older now, slower but still sharp. He once told you, "Power is like water. You may not see it, but it flows everywhere, shaping the stones without force." Those words resonate now more than ever. Your life has been about the flow of information, of influence, of survival, even in the quiet of your chambers. You remain vigilant. A misstep by a new eunuch, a subtle change in a minister's demeanor, the faint rustle of a forbidden letter, all register instantly. You have honed your perception into something almost instinctual. This is your legacy, the unseen, unacknowledged vigilance that keeps the palace alive. As night falls, you lie back on your mat, listening to the faint hum of distant lanterns and the soft creak of ancient wooden beams. Your body aches, your mind races, and yet there is a satisfaction in having endured, in having adapted, in having quietly become indispensable. You are not the emperor, nor the ministers, nor the soldiers, but without you, none of it would function. By now, the years have layered over you like varnish on old wood. Your reflection in polished bronze is familiar but strange. The boy who arrived trembling, barely walking, seems almost a ghost. You carry memories of mutilation, exile from family, endless corridors, whispered secrets, and fleeting intimacies. And yet, you are still here, breathing, observing, surviving, and somehow, thriving. Your role has evolved. You are no longer simply a servant or messenger. You are a silent strategist, a curator of knowledge, a subtle influencer whose presence is felt even when unseen. You guide younger eunuchs, manage delicate correspondences, and anticipate the needs of the emperor and his court with near prescience. The palace recognizes your value, though your name rarely graces the annals of history. Historians still debate whether the most influential eunuchs were saviors of dynasties or manipulators of chaos. Some point to records of generals, ministers, and scholars swayed by their counsel. Others depict them as opportunistic figures whose power was ultimately precarious. In your own experience, you realize that both are true. Influence is not about grandeur, it is about perception, knowledge, and timing. A quirky tidbit: in some imperial courts, eunuchs maintained entire secret libraries, often hidden beneath floorboards or behind false walls. They preserved texts on medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and poetry, quietly safeguarding knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. You have started doing the same, collecting scraps of scrolls, practicing calligraphy, and noting subtle details in ink-stained journals. Your legacy, silent as it is, may one day outlive the empire itself. Even in your final years of active service, vigilance never ceases. You notice small changes in tone, shifts in posture, subtle gestures among courtiers that hint at intrigue or ambition. A word left unsaid, a glance misinterpreted, a scroll misplaced, all could have consequences. You have become a master of discretion, the ultimate observer, walking the line between invisibility and influence with ease. The palace is now less daunting and more familiar. The labyrinthine halls, echoing chambers, and scented courtyards are companions. You walk them with the rhythm of someone attuned to the pulse of its life. Each day is a careful choreography of duty, observation, and subtle intervention. The lines between work, survival, and power blur, but you have learned to navigate them, and yet, in moments of quiet, you reflect on what has been lost: family, freedom, the open sky, ordinary human experiences that others take for granted. You acknowledge the sacrifices, the silences, the vigilance that defined your life. But there is also pride, in having endured, adapted, and left a mark unseen yet real. Now, lying on your mat, you allow the palace to recede into shadows. You close your eyes and let the memories drift like lanterns across the courtyard. The whispers, the footsteps, the delicate balance of power, they fade softly. You breathe in, slow and deep, the weight of centuries contained within your bones. You have lived a life unlike any other, and somehow, you have mastered it. The corridors grow quieter as your consciousness slows. You feel the warmth of the evening settle against your skin, the subtle scent of incense mingling with the faint chill of stone floors. Thoughts of duty, observation, and whispered secrets drift away like soft smoke, leaving only a gentle awareness of your own heartbeat. The palace, once a maze of fear, protocol, and constant vigilance, now exists only as a memory behind closed eyes. You imagine sunlight spilling over distant rooftops, the faint murmur of distant birds, and the soft rustle of leaves in gardens that stretch beyond walls. Even in absence, these images comfort you. They remind you that your life, though constrained, was also filled with quiet wonder and intricate beauty. Your body releases its tension. Muscles that carried decades of work ease, your chest expands with unhurried breaths, and the quiet hum of your surroundings becomes a lullaby. You sense the past and present blending, the boy who arrived trembling and the man who survived countless trials converging in peaceful harmony. Let the palace fade further, until only soft memory remains. You are free to drift, carried on gentle waves of reflection and calm. The world outside is distant, and for now, it matters little. What remains is the quiet satisfaction of having endured, of having observed, and of having lived a life extraordinary in its silence and subtlety. Breathe deeply, feel the warmth of your mat, and let the cadence of your heart lull you toward rest. The whispers and shadows are gone, only stillness remains.